All right, diving in. First episode of a brand new deep dive. And this one, oh boy, this one's a big one. Early Greek philosophy.
Oh, yeah.
You guys specifically requested we cover the pre-Socratics.
Good choice.
And just, skimming through the material, I got to say I'm hooked already.
Yeah.
It's incredible how these philosophers, centuries ago, were asking the same questions we're still trying to figure out today. Like, where did the universe come from? What even is reality?
Yeah.
Mind-blowing.
Yeah, it really is. Putting on my ancient Greece hat for this deep dive.
Yeah.
I can tell you right now, these pre-Socratic thinkers, they laid the foundation for, so much of Western thought. Their ideas, well, sometimes they're a bit out there,
Oh, yeah.
but that's what makes them so fascinating.
I agree. So, to be sure, we're all on the same page here. We're zeroing in on that period
Yeah.
before Socrates, right?
Right.
Using the history of Western philosophy as our guide, the source you sent, but laser-focused on the pre-Socratics.
Exactly. And to really get these guys, you need some context. Ancient Greece, it wasn't a unified country. Think more like a bunch of independent city-states, each with its own unique character.
Okay.
You've got Athens, the intellectual powerhouse.
Right.
You've got Sparta, the military machine.
Yeah.
And then places like Ionia, this incredible melting pot of cultures because of all the trade routes going through there. This variety, that's key because it fueled so much philosophical debate and innovation.
Yeah. I mean, it's like a philosophical battle royale, each city-state bringing their own ideas to the ring.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got the setting, but what about the Greek gods? They were a little more extra, shall we say, compared to how we think about religion today.
Oh, absolutely. Forget about this single, all-powerful god. The Greek gods were more like, I guess, superpowered celebrities, all the drama and intrigue that comes with it.
Oh, yeah.
Jealousy, love affairs, family feuds, the whole nine yards.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. They were a massive part of everyday life. Understanding them is key to understanding Greek philosophy.
Makes sense. So how do these pre-Socratic thinkers fit into all of this? Where do we even start?
Our journey begins with Thales of Miletus,
Okay.
around the 6th century BC. He's considered the first philosopher in the Western tradition. And get this, he believed everything ultimately came from water.
Water. So we're all just like fancy walking puddles.
Well, not exactly, but think about it. Water is essential for life, right? It can change states. Solid ice, flowing liquid, misty vapor. Thales might have observed what looked like water transforming into other substances. He was looking for this single element that could explain all the diversity of the universe.
So instead of relying on, myths and gods to explain the world, he's looking for answers in the natural world itself.
Exactly.
That's a pretty big shift in thinking.
Huge. This marks the beginning of this move away from supernatural explanations towards observation and reason.
Yeah.
He completely flipped the script on how humans understood their place in the cosmos.
Okay, Thales, the OG water philosopher. Who comes along next to shake things up?
Next up is Anaximander, also from Miletus. Now, he wasn't buying the whole water theory.
Really?
He thought, how can everything come from something as specific as water? There's got to be something more fundamental. So he proposed the operon.
Operon. Sounds like something straight out of like a sci-fi novel or something.
It kind of is. It's this undefined, limitless, primordial substance. Like a cosmic soup of pure potential.
Right.
Everything emerges from it and eventually returns to it.
Okay, so if Thales is looking to nature for answers, and Anaximander's going full abstract.
Yeah.
Like they're both trying to solve the same cosmic puzzle, but with totally different approaches.
Exactly, and that's what makes this period so dynamic.
Yeah.
These early thinkers were grappling with these enormous questions, and they didn't have the tools of modern science, so they relied on logic and observation to come up with their theories.
And clearly, there was room for debate. Water versus the cosmic soup. Where do we go from there?
Well, get ready, because things are about to get even wilder when we introduce Pythagoras to the mix. Yes, that Pythagoras, the triangle guy. He wasn't just a math whiz. He was a philosopher with some really unique ideas.
Pythagoras, the philosopher. All right, you've got my attention.
Prepare to be amazed. Pythagoras believed in reincarnation, the music of the spheres, and that numbers were the key to understanding the universe.
Hold on. Back up a second. The music of the what?
The music of the spheres. He believed that the planets and stars moved in perfect harmony, creating this celestial music that we can't hear.
Wow.
It's this beautiful idea that blends math, music, and cosmology.
Yeah.
It shows how intertwined philosophy and mysticism were back then.
Okay, reincarnation, cosmic music and numbers holding the secrets of the universe.
Hmm.
Pythagoras was playing on a whole other level. Did anyone, push back against these mystical ideas?
Oh, absolutely. Not everyone was on board with Pythagoras's mystical, number-obsessed approach.
Right.
There was another group, the Ionians, who were all about a more rational and empirical view of the world. One key figure here is Anaxagoras.
Anaxagoras, remind me, where does he fit into all of this?
Well, he brought philosophy to Athens and had a big influence on our friend Socrates, who we'll talk about later.
Okay.
Anaxagoras believed in this mind that ordered the universe, but he wasn't into the traditional Greek gods.
Interesting.
He represents this constant tension between the mystical and the rational, a theme that runs throughout the history of philosophy.
A philosophical tug of war? This is getting good.
Yeah.
What happens next in this battle of ideas?
So before we went on that little tangent, we were talking about Anaxagoras and his mind that brought order to the universe.
Right.
It's a pretty cool concept, kind of bridges the gap between the mystical stuff like Pythagoras's ideas and the more rational approach of those Ionians.
Yeah, he's trying to find a middle ground between the two.
Right.
So we've got the water theory, the cosmic soup, the number-obsessed mystics, and the mind bringing order to chaos.
Mm.
What other wild ideas were these pre-Socratics cooking up?
Okay, get ready for a real head scratcher. Because next we meet Parmenides,
Okay.
this philosopher from Elea,
Uh-huh.
and he just drops this bombshell. Change is an illusion, and reality is actually unchanging and eternal.
Hold on. Is he saying everything is just frozen in time, but things obviously change all the time? The seasons change, we age, trends come and go.
That's exactly what Parmenides' critics said.
Right.
His student, Zeno, even came up with these famous paradoxes to illustrate, the logical problems with the idea of motion.
Right.
You might have heard of the one with Achilles and the tortoise.
Oh, yeah.
No matter how fast Achilles runs, he can never catch the tortoise because he has to cover an infinite number of increasingly smaller distances.
Yeah, that one always makes my brain hurt. But I get the point. Parmenides is really making us think about how we perceive reality. If our senses tell us things change, but logic says otherwise, which one do we trust?
Exactly. He's shaking the very foundations of how we understand the world.
Yeah.
And his ideas, as mind-bending as they are, had a huge impact on later philosophers, especially Plato.
Right.
Parmenides really forced them to grapple with some pretty hefty questions about, the nature of reality, perception, knowledge itself.
Okay, so Parmenides throws this massive philosophical wrench into the works. Did anyone try to, offer a more, shall we say, grounded counter-argument?
Absolutely. Enter Leucippus and Democritus.
Okay.
These guys developed the theory that everything is made up of tiny, indivisible particles called atoms, constantly moving in a void.
Atoms. That sounds shockingly modern. Were they like the ancient Greek version of physicists?
In a way, yeah. While their atomic theory wasn't exactly like the modern one, it was a remarkably prescient attempt to explain the universe, using purely physical principles.
Mm-hmm.
They were saying, forget the gods, forget the mystical forces. The universe is essentially just tiny bits of stuff bumping around in empty space.
It's amazing how these pre-Socratics were grappling with such complex ideas using just their powers of observation and logic. So we've gone from water to the boundless appearance to the music of the spheres to the illusion of change, and now we're down to the atomic level. That's quite a journey.
It really is. And speaking of journeys, our own philosophical expedition wouldn't be complete without mentioning the man who kind of marks a turning point in Greek thought, a figure whose ideas would echo through the halls of philosophy for centuries to come. Socrates?
Oh, Socrates. The name everyone knows, even if they've never really, dipped their toes into philosophy. But here's the thing. I always hear about Socrates, but I never actually hear Socrates. Didn't he write anything down?
That's the interesting thing about Socrates. He didn't leave behind any writings of his own.
Huh.
We know about him primarily through the writings of his student, Plato,
Oh, okay.
who immortalized Socrates' ideas in a series of dialogues.
So it's like we're getting a secondhand account, kind of like playing a game of philosophical telephone.
Exactly. But Plato was an incredibly gifted writer, and his dialogues, they offer this vivid and captivating portrait of Socrates, like the philosophical gadfly of Athens. What sets Socrates apart is that he kind of shifted the focus of philosophy from cosmology, all that big picture stuff about the universe, to something more personal, more immediate,
Okay.
ethics and human behavior.
So instead of asking, what is the universe made of, he's asking, how should we live?
Yeah.
That's a pretty radical shift in perspective.
It is. He famously said, the unexamined life is not worth living.
Wow.
Socrates was all about self-reflection, challenging assumptions, and pursuing wisdom and virtue.
It's like he's encouraging us to take a deep dive into ourselves. And speaking of deep dives, we've only scratched the surface of Socrates and his impact on Western thought.
That's true. And to really understand his legacy, we need to explore the ideas of his most famous student, Plato,
Right?
who kind of took the philosophical torch and ran with it.
Sounds like a journey for part 3 of
Yeah.
our deep dive. I'm already eager to learn more. But before we move on to Plato, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier. Those independent city-states and their unique, personalities. It got me thinking. We always hear about ancient Greece as the birthplace of Western civilization.
Yeah.
But what about all the other cultures that existed back then? Did they have their own forms of philosophy?
That's a fantastic question. And it's so important to remember that ancient Greece wasn't the only center of intellectual activity.
Right?
There were amazing civilizations all over the world, each with its own ways of understanding the world and the human condition.
It's like we're so used to this Eurocentric view of history that we sometimes forget about all the other voices and perspectives out there.
Exactly. And while our focus today is on the ancient Greeks, it's crucial to acknowledge that they were part of a much larger global conversation. Exploring those other voices and perspectives is a whole other deep dive in itself.
Absolutely. I think it's a perfect note to end part 2 on. We've covered so much ground, from water to atoms to the illusion of change to the meaning of life itself. These pre-Socratics were truly ahead of their time.
They were, and their ideas continue to inspire and challenge us today.
Back again for our deep dive. It's crazy how fast these philosophical conversations go, huh?
I know, right?
We've journeyed from water to atoms, encountered cosmic music, mind-boggling paradoxes, and now we're about to tackle one of the biggest names in philosophy, Plato.
You know, it's funny how even after all these centuries, the name Plato still holds so much weight. He's like the philosophical rock star.
Yeah.
Everyone's heard of him, even if they can't quite remember why.
Exactly. But I have a feeling after this deep dive, we'll all be dropping Plato references left and right.
Yeah.
So where do we even begin with this philosophical giant?
Well, I think a good starting point is his theory of forms,
Okay.
which, we touched upon a bit earlier. It's like the ultimate philosophical cheat sheet. Understanding this theory unlocks a whole universe of Plato's ideas.
All right, give me a refresher. What are these forms all about again?
Imagine this. Everything we see and experience, it's just a shadow, an imperfect copy of a higher, more perfect reality that exists beyond our senses.
I'm picturing that classic cave analogy. Shadows dancing on the wall, hinting at something real but hidden outside.
You got it. Plato's allegory of the cave describes exactly that, the limitations of our senses, and how easily we can mistake those shadows for the real deal. Those real things outside the cave. Those are the forms. Perfect, eternal, unchanging blueprints for everything in our world.
Okay, so give me a concrete example. What's the form of, say, a flower?
Okay, think about all the different flowers out there. Roses, lilies, daisies, they come in every shape and size and color you can imagine.
Right.
But there's something that makes them all undeniably flowers, right?
Yeah.
Some essential flowerness that unites them all.
I can see that, even if I can't articulate it exactly.
And for Plato, that essential flowerness, that is the form of a flower. It's the perfect, abstract idea of a flower, existing outside of time and space. The blueprint for every flower that ever blooms in our world.
So the flowers we see and smell, they're just imperfect copies of this perfect form.
Exactly. And this applies to, well, everything. Beauty, justice, even seemingly mundane things like chairs and tables. For Plato, these forms are the ultimate source of all reality and knowledge.
But if these forms are beyond our senses, how do we access them?
That's where things get really interesting. Plato believed that our souls were actually in contact with the realm of forms before we were born.
Okay.
But upon entering this world, well, we forget. We forget that perfect knowledge.
Like we're born with a case of, cosmic amnesia.
Exactly. But through philosophy, reason, deep contemplation, we can, remember, reconnect with that lost knowledge.
So it's like a philosophical quest to reclaim our true selves.
Precisely. And that's why Plato placed such a high value on education, on the pursuit of knowledge. He believed that philosophy is the key to, liberating ourselves from the illusions of the senses and grasping the true nature of reality.
Okay, now I'm really starting to understand the hype around Plato. It's like he's offering us this glimpse into a whole other dimension of reality.
He is. And that sense of wonder, of possibility, that's what's made his philosophy so enduring.
But Plato wasn't just about, you know, abstract theorizing, right?
Yeah.
Didn't he have some pretty strong opinions about how, like, society should function?
Oh, absolutely. He had this whole blueprint for the perfect society, which he laid out in his famous work, The Republic,
Right.
and the rulers of this ideal state,
Yeah.
philosopher kings.
Philosopher kings. Okay, now we're really getting into sci-fi territory.
It might sound far-fetched,
Yeah.
but Plato's argument, it's pretty intriguing. He believed that, society's problems, they stem from ignorance, lack of wisdom. So the solution, put the most knowledgeable and virtuous people in charge.
So basically the ultimate meritocracy.
Right.
Like the brainiest folks are at the helm.
Not just intelligence, but wisdom, a deep understanding of justice, goodness, and the forms themselves. Plato believed that those who truly grasp these concepts, they're going to lead justly and for the good of everyone.
I can see where he's coming from, but something tells me not everyone would be thrilled about the idea of being ruled by, like, a bunch of philosophers.
You're right. And to be fair, his ideal society, it has been criticized for being, a little too idealistic and potentially authoritarian.
Definitely not the most democratic system.
It wasn't. But even so, his ideas about the importance of wisdom and virtue and leadership, it's something to think about even today.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think it speaks to the enduring power of Plato's ideas. Even if we don't agree with all of them, they force us to think critically about ourselves, our societies, and the world around us.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of philosophy, right?
Yeah.
It's not about finding all the answers. It's about asking the right questions.
Right. The ones that push us to grow, to learn, and to challenge our assumptions.
Well said. And I think that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the pre-Socratics and their incredible legacy, culminating in the philosophical powerhouse that is Plato. What a journey it's been.
It really has. From water to the forms we've explored. Like the origins of Western thought, witness the birth of ideas that continue to shape our world, even today.
I don't know about you, but I'm feeling pretty inspired to keep exploring these philosophical avenues, and I hope you are too.
Me too. Remember, the pursuit of wisdom, it's a lifelong journey. There's always something new to learn, to question, to ponder.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. Until next time, keep those minds churning.